on Georgia O'Keeffe. O, capital K-E-E-F-F-E. Put in the first slide, please. It took Georgia O'Keeffe almost half her life to reach the hard, clear spaces of her beloved New Mexico, where she resides now well into her 80s. She was born on a farm in Wisconsin, one of 7 children, later moved to Virginia. She studied art in Chicago and then in New York at the Art Students League, where as a lively beauty with short curly hair she was fondly called Patsy. As a student, O'Keeffe became skilled in the virtuoso techniques influenced by her teachers and won some prizes in still life. But she never felt that this was really her own painting and gave it up for a long period of time. Then, after moving back to Virginia, she succumbed to a summer art course in 1912. It was taught by a disciple of Arthur Dow, a teacher imbued with the principles of Oriental art. Dow emphasized that abstract design was the primer of painting. He encouraged the students to produce an art which would subordinate the imitation of nature to the flat relations of design. Above all, he urged them to find new ways of expressing a beautiful idea. This appealed to Miss O'Keeffe, and she took up painting again, moving to Texas to teach art at one period of her career. With these concepts liberating her own, and she started painting again. One day in 1915, she locked herself up in a room and had a private art exhibition of her own work, picking out the ones that she felt were influenced by certain teachers, looking at others that she felt were entirely her own idea. Recognizing what she was expressing on her own, eliminating those that were too much influenced by instructors, she decided on her path of art that she should take. These early watercolors, very quick, simple, fresh things of a sunrise, come in a series of 3. Slide, please. All of Georgia O'Keeffe's work shows a great subtlety, a plainness, sort of an empty quality, or a soft quality that you might find in Oriental art. The subject matter is eliminated, all detailed, and has been brought down to the most simple forms and shapes. Of course, in any watercolor, it's no great statement as a piece of art, but it does have a quality and a freshness that you achieve in no other medium. Slide 3. And in this, with just the blurring of the paper, the sun, the warmth of the light sort of coming up out of this egg-shaped proportion that she developed for this series, you get the effect without all the details. Slide, please. After a while, she decided she wanted to paint some flowers. And then she said, oh, well, nobody would look at them just being flowers, so she thought she'd make them huge, big, filling the canvases. Her surfaces are smooth, uncluttered, no sight of brush stroke, although close up they do have sort of a broadness of change of tone or of pattern. But she moves in and analyzes the essence of the flower, of the design, going past just the petal itself and finding the negative space or the area between the petals. In 1929, on her first trip to New Mexico, she brought back a carload full of skulls, thinking that they were, not knowing exactly what she was going to do to them, but they later became a very important series of paintings that she did in the 1930s. Slide, please. In this, one of her most important early canvases of the 1920s, which is called Black Iris. At first glance, because she has moved in so closely to the flower, it looks like an abstract pattern, almost a cathedral of the petals forming the void of where the major petal at the bottom portion of the flower sort of juts out toward you. All of her designs are simplified, even though that she enlarges the object to immense proportions. And most of her paintings are smaller than what you see them on the screen now, but fair size. She doesn't complicate matters with tiny little detailing. All of the petals become smooth. The blendings of tone sort of flow into one another that give almost an ethereal effect to her work. From a distance, they stand out as very bold, stark patterns of different changes of color. As you move in closer to them, there are these subtle blendings, this sort of haziness of when one tone enters into the field of another tone. The overall effect is a beautiful design. Slide, please. Some of her things are completely abstract in nature. She may take the line of a hill or the light reflecting over a mountain. Some of them are just pure, free, abstract form that would have no meaning other than a sense of design. Slide, please. And yet some of them have a quality of the abstract combined with nature. She takes nature and she interprets it in her own way. She rises early each morning with her two chow dogs. She has two places in New Mexico, one an old adobe villa that she said when she first bought it in 1946 was like a pig pen with no roof or the roof partially caving in. She decided at first that she would not try to combat the dirt and the earth around it. And then, because of the supplies were some 70 miles distant, she finally succumbed to the gardening episode, although she felt it would take too much of her time from painting. And she grows all the food that she eats year-round in this near the adobe villa and a ranch that she has just north of it in New Mexico. As I said, she's well into her 80s. She first received some promise when a friend sent a roll of her drawings to Gallery 271 in New York City that was run by Alfred Stieglitz, the famous photographer. He was immediately taken with her drawings. He said, just pure woman in the drawing, the sensuous form of women. And he gave a one-man show for her drawings. So this sort of irritated her because she did not feel that they were to be exhibited. She just wanted a criticism on them. But by encouragement with Stieglitz, he did have a one-man show for her the following year. She is one of the great pioneer modern artists of the American scene. Slide, please. Her forms are always simple, moving in on an abstract motif or moving in close to her beloved flowers. Rich in color, bright. The execution is clean, crisp. There's nothing misunderstood about her paintings. They are very forthright, direct statements of the object. Slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, in 1929, she made her first trip into New Mexico. Her traveling companions thought she was crazy when she loaded the car with all of these bleached white skulls and pieces of bone from dead cattle. She did have an idea that these showed a greater beauty of the animal in their starkness and in their death than when they were alive. She said she was crazy about the country from the very first. She thought, how can I take part of it with me to work on? And so it was the skulls that became the part that returned to New York. It stayed around her studio for several years before she actually put something down on canvas. To me, they are as beautiful as anything I know. To me, they are strangely more living than the animals walking around. hair, eyes, and all, with their tails switching. The bone seemed to cut sharply to the center of something that is keenly alive on the desert, even though it is vast and empty and untouchable, and knows no kindness at all with its beauty. Slide, please. There were a whole series of these paintings based on the skull, and some of them, even as this one, become sort of surrealistic, with it soaring up in the clouds with the cactus flower beside it, and the rugged mountains below it. You have the feeling that she's greatly in touch with the nature and of the land that she lives with. It is this sort of starkness that is very appealing in her paintings. Just as the light edges over the darkened cliffs, this sort of tall, silent woman with a stick in hand to ward off the snakes scans the mist in the far-off mountains. She picks up a stone and smooths it, touches the twisted branch of a pinon tree, toes a patch of lichen moss. This is the way she begins each day, sort of her communication with nature. When she was 37, she married Alfred Stieglitz, who was then 60 and one of the foremost photographers in the world, and helped him run the gallery in New York. This took away time from her paintings. But as she said, it was an interesting experience, being married to Stieglitz, succumbing to his wishes, using the best of the light of the day for his photography rather than her painting. And during their married years, he took more than 500 photographs of Miss O'Keeffe. She was adamant, though, she kept her maiden name, and if anybody ever called her Mrs. Stieglitz, she reminded them that she was Miss O'Keeffe. She was slowly included within the circle of Stieglitz's friends, Charles Demuth, another American painter, and became one of the group. Slide, please. Her colors are rich, vibrant, stark, crisp edge. The bleached white bones giving the same sort of sharp effect as you might find them against the richness of the colors in the desert. Slide, please. All things, where she lives, affects her own art, and this a nice stark abstract of buildings and perspective, where she lived in New York before she moved to New Mexico. Slide, please. Another form of the animal bones was the pelvic bone that she found in the desert. And she looked at them, kicking them over, wondering what she could do with them for years, before she decided that it was the areas, the spaces, the negative areas, the things that she saw through the holes of the pelvis that became more interesting in shape than the bone itself. So these sort of became frames for the abstractions of the negative voids of the spaces of the bones. Slide, please. When she decided at that first private one-man showing of her work to herself of what direction that she was headed, very little has changed since the 1920s. There was recently a one-woman show of her work in the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston with something like 70 to 80 large paintings, including the largest one that she's ever attempted, which is something like 24 feet long and of clouds, that she painted in 1963. Slide, please. We will see it a little bit later on. This painting was included in the Art of America by the Johnson Wax Company, selected by Lee Nordness, in selecting the 100 outstanding artists in the United States, including one work of each one. Her things, even though some of them become completely abstract, a lack of reality, they still have the feeling of organic stuff, of nature, of patterns, of something. Slide, please. This large painting, The Clouds, which he completed in 1963, something like 24 feet long. Of course, in shipment to the exhibition, it's rolled up and then restretched wherever it's exhibited. But her style has remained fairly constant. Some painters developed gradually, some of them quite violently in style changes over the years. But Georgia O'Keeffe found a style that expressed her own ideas or her own interpretations of nature, and she stuck with this same scheme for over the many years. Slide, please. For the review, we will start back with the colonial artist, John Singleton Copley, C-O-P-L-E-Y, a self-trained colonial painter, pre-revolutionary, then moving to England and becoming influenced by the 18th century English face painters, but in his American style, a very direct, crisp, straightforward, realistic presentation of the sitter, and usually an informal pose, although the clothing and the props around it show the person's station in life. Slide, please. Gilbert Stuart, S-T-U-A-R-T, another colonial or revolutionary federal, actually, period portrait painter, who emphasized more the character of the person. His backgrounds show some light and variation so that there you have a feeling of atmosphere behind the head. The clothing, well done. Very seldom did he do a full standing portrait. And is probably best known for his portraits of Washington. Slide, please. George Caleb Bingham, B-I-N-G-H-A-M, was a Midwestern, mid-19th century American painter, portraying landscapes in scenes of the Midwestern United States. Although he did most of his things based on a parallel perspective with the figures piling up in a pyramidal form with a vast space behind the figures. After a trip to Dusseldorf, he turned to more pure landscape painting and showed fairly grandiose views of the western United States. Slide, please. Thomas Eakins was a late 19th century American painter and was the realist of the American school. An absolute stickler for authenticity and accuracy of detail. He would do scale models of the subjects or the scene to make sure that he would get correct lighting and perspective. Dissected corpses to study anatomy so that all of his figure drawings were absolutely correct. Mostly portraits, unflattering views of the sitters, and some sporting events. Slide, please. James McNeill Whistler, W-H-I-S-T-L-E-R, was the sophisticate of the 19th century American painting school. Most of his time was spent in Europe under heavy influence of the 19th century French school. Although he did portraits and landscapes, they were usually based on a central theme, either an arrangement within a certain color range. Most of his compositions were based on a color scheme, calling them arrangements, nocturnes, notes, sort of turning them into abstract themes. Slide, please. Albert Pinkham Ryder, R-Y-D-E-R, was the mystic of the 19th century American painters, simplifying his compositions into a few large, blobby, dark forms uh, with themes from the Bible, from Shakespeare, and from opera. His main theme, though, was a seascape with the boat heading toward the unknown or into the unconscious. Slide, please. Winslow Homer, Homer, was another natural or outdoor painter, spending some of his years, a part of his years, on the rugged northern Maine coast, and other parts doing watercolors in the sunny Bahama Islands. Slide, please. Then after the turn of the century, with a group of painters called the Ashcan School, turning their thoughts inward to the views of the city, to sort of genre scenes, everyday occurrences, we have John Sloan, S-L-O-A-N, the member of the Ashcan School we have selected to look at, in his views of early 20th century New York City mainly, or city views, usually in the poorer section or the tenement section of the city. Slide, please. And Georgia O'Keeffe, a 20th century American abstract painter that deals mostly with organic subjects in very simple, broad, stated views.
Slide, please. And the primitive artists, the untrained, unsophisticated, naive painters that portrayed the early colonial America in strict detail, lack of perspective, but a charming presentation of American life. Slide, please. Clear the machine. This is test number 1, 9 weeks. First slide, please. Keep going. Number 1. Slide, please. Number 2. Slide, please. Number 3. Slide, please. Number 4. Slide, please. Number 5. Slide, please. Number 6. Slide, please. Number 7. Slide, please. Number 8. Slide, please. Number 9. Slide, please. Number 10. Slide, please.